The worst thing is being a promoter with a $100,000 show on the board and a week out and you've only got $60,000 worth of ticket sales. And then the last week, everybody all of a sudden starts buying. I mean, it'll turn your hair gray.
You just heard Matthew Spindler from the Bakersfield Fox Theater. The Fox Theater opened on Christmas Day, 1930. The Fox was one of its last of its kind built in the Gilded Age. The first film on the Fox's big silver screen was Just Imagine, a sci-fi tale set 50 years in the future to 1980. In 1977, the big screen went dark as the Fox closed its doors after 47 years in show business. It sat silent until June 28, 1994, when the Fox Theater Foundation, a local nonprofit organization, officially saved it from the wrecking ball. Funds were donated by over 380 Save the Fox donors for the down payment, with restoration beginning July 1st. The Fox Theater Foundation's ultimate goal is to complete a 5-star restoration, making the Fox Theater the heart of downtown's cultural district. The executive director of the Fox is Matthew Spindler, who is a CSUB grad and has been running the Bakersfield Fox since 2017. Previous theater experience started at the Visalia Fox Theater, where he was also executive director there. Prior to working at the Fox Theater in Visalia, Matthew had not had show experience prior to that time. In today's show, we discuss operating the Fox Theater and getting acts into Bakersfield. Later in the show, we talk about some of the stars that have been through the Fox Theater and performed on their stage. And be sure to stay tuned to hear about the Memories on H project, which will culminate in a fantastic book on the history of the Fox Theater. That is an upcoming project that they are working on now.
Welcome back to the Our 2 Cents podcast, the show where your local professionals sit down with an array of guests to hear their story and impart some wisdom for both business and life-improving skills. This is your place to hear business and community leaders discuss relevant topics that matter to you.
And welcome to the show today. My name is John Duffield. I'm a local CPA. Before we get into today's episode, I would like to encourage our listeners to follow us on all social media platforms. We now are on YouTube and Twitter, as well as on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And we do appreciate the follows. And so go look for us there. And we've had a lot of success kind of building our listenership and our followers. And we appreciate you from that perspective. So here today with Matt, who's the general manager of and kind of president, runs the Fox Theater here in Bakersfield. Matt, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me, John.
Yeah. How's your day today? What's new today?
What's new today? We're working on new shows that hopefully we'll be announcing very soon. Also kind of working on some other little side projects at the theater as well. Good.
So I can't wait to get into that. You know, I don't know how many times I've actually been in the Fox myself, but quite a few for different functions, anywhere from comedy shows to concerts to just presentations, right? Just kind of some of our local civic presentations. But and I want to get in and talk about those different things. But before we get into that, I want to talk about you and kind of your background. And then you started with Fox kind of entities if they were in Visalia. So tell me how that went. How'd you end up there?
Usually when I tell this story, I tell people I kind of Forrest Gumped my way into it.
Okay.
I got involved with Visalia because I was a board member with Habitat for Humanity in Tulare County. We were at a house dedication, and coincidentally, a couple weeks before, I reached out to Visalia Fox, not knowing who they are and really kind of what they do, just to try to maybe do some work together with some of the community stuff, and mentioned that at that house dedication to a friend of mine who happened to be friends with the board president of the Visalia Fox Theater.
Okay.
And she went off on how the Visalia Fox is going through all these terrible things. It's having all these issues. Me and my background and kind of seeing the place had interest, and she put me in contact with the board president and had a conversation about how I could help. And as she explained more of what was going on, the kind of financial issues they were having, I was like, well, you're not going to be able to pay me. But at the time I was married, I go, between my wife and I think maybe we can help you guys out. Put together a presentation. A week later, we were hired, and we were co-executive directors of the Visalia Fox Theater, not knowing what we were getting into.
Right. And it's a nonprofit organization, just like our local Fox is a nonprofit organization, right?
Yeah, same history. They both went through the same trials of possibly getting shut down and torn down and all that type of stuff. And same history as far as community groups getting together to save them.
Yeah, I'm assuming those had nothing to do with each other, right? And so it was just local community members that said, "Hey, let's go put this together to save it for our community," right?
Yeah. I mean, the history goes back to the 1930s when these theaters were being built. First run movie theaters for the Fox Theater Corporation. As that business evolved, they all started having the same issues. Some were torn down, and some, like ours, were saved.
What did Fox, the corporation, do? Did they just abandon leases or sell the properties to?
There's a big history there. In the late 30s, William Fox, who was the owner at the time, got in trouble for bribing a judge, from my understanding, lost control of the business. And then in the 40s, the government basically split up all the production houses and the theaters themselves, calling them monopolies. So they had to separate. And that's where the theaters come on their own, and why you now have Fox News, Fox Entertainment, which is part of what we were.
Sure. No, it's interesting seeing that change and seeing the history about it. So tell me, so you end up going as that executive director of Fox Visalia. So what was that experience like?
It was a big learning experience, not knowing how shows work and the ins and outs of what has to happen just to get somebody on stage was unique. But at the end of the day, it was still a business, and the numbers were still there, and there were things that you just kind of know when you are a business major and doing that type of stuff. The partnership between my ex-wife and I, she was more the front end, and I was more the back end doing the day-to-day stuff, and we were making a good partnership.
Yeah, what's the most surprising thing that you've learned kind of in being in that industry, if you will? What's the hardest part about it? What fascinates you, or what's interesting from that perspective that you wouldn't think from the outside?
How hard it is to get a show to stop at your theater. There's a lot involved, and we get it all the time where people's like, why don't you bring this band? Why don't you bring this artist? And the amount of, there's politics, there's money, there's a lot of things that has to happen on the back end just to get someone to show up and play your stage. I was thinking the same thing back then. I was like, oh, this will be easy. We'll be able to get all these bands in, and it just wasn't the case. How
often are bands or entertainment groups coming to you versus you having to go chase them now?
So based on our business model, we primarily work with promoters, and those promoters get contacted by agents who are then contacted by the artists to basically give the agents what instructions they have on how they want to tour, and then it's up to the promoters to work with venues like us that you kind of work a lot of bench numbers and dates and hopefully try to find something that works along a tour that everything gets plugged in.
And so the relationship typically on a concert, I know you guys have some decent concerts coming up. They're just renting that facility from you at that point, or what's that relationship?
Yeah, basically, there's some small stuff that we'll promote. The risks that we can take are nothing compared to what those guys take on. And not only that, they have a buying power that we don't have. When they buy tours, they buy multiple stops, where if we were to look at it, it's just one stop, and typically you don't get the type of attention that way.
Yeah, when you're saying you're buying multiple stops, you're talking about advertising dollars? Or
No. So when you buy a tour, one of the promoters I work with, they'll usually have 5 or 6 other venues that when they go to the agent, they say, well, we can get you Bakersfield, Fresno, Modesto, and whatever, so on and so forth. And that makes it more valuable to the agent because now you've got all these dates handled by this one promoter, and it simplifies things.
I see. So they're getting multiple nights lined up and economies of scale, right?
Exactly.
Kind of going through that process. And so you ended up, going from Visalia to Bakersfield. How did that happen?
Coincidentally, my wife and I were doing very well with the theater, and we caught the attention of the board of the Bakersfield Fox Theater, and they reached out just wanting to talk to us, kind of see what we were doing, us not knowing really what was happening here at their theater at the time. They were having some troubles, and looking at our business model, I guess, is something that they could do. Fast forward a few months to a year, maybe, my wife at the time and now ex are having our fun. I really enjoyed working in the industry, and reached back out to Bakersfield and just asked if I could volunteer. And it went from conversations to volunteering to being a board member to running the place. And I was like, whoa, let's hold on there. That's a big ask. But we sat down, and they convinced me that if I did what I said I could do, that I would be able to, to pay myself, essentially, because I took a big haircut coming into this theater just to get it going. And that was kind of the start of it. That's how I came into Bakersfield.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I have to say, as a community member and over my professional career, I've been in that theater a lot of times. Again, sometimes for, local civic kind of awards presentations, whatever it happens to be, to concerts or comedy shows and things of that nature. So from the outside, to me, it looks like it's easy and it looks very, very successful. And I'm sure that's not the case. You know, I've heard you make a couple of comments that at times you guys have struggled or struggled to be successful. So, what's that challenge like?
Well, it goes back to, first, the community sees the Bakersfield Fox Theater, and it's this beautiful building. It's this amazing stage. But on a business level, selling tickets in Bakersfield is not an easy thing. So to get the phone ring where a promoter actually wants to do shows here is the complicated process. I've worked very hard the last 5 years that I've been there to bring down our costs as much as possible, do all the different types of things to make the risk as little as it can be for those promoters and encourage them to help us turn our lights on more often.
Sure. And I mean, obviously that's what it is. It's just it's a stop where they're looking for an opportunity to make money, right? Yeah. As a promoter. And so the if you can increase their odds of having that financial success and they become more interested. What kind of shows that seem to work for the Fox Theater and work for Bakersfield? What's the appeal and what do we embrace when those things happen here?
The blue-collar comedy is definitely what works best in that theater. It would be easier for me to tell you what comedians haven't been there than to list the comedians that have, and that list is extensive.
Yeah, no, I have that list, and it was interesting. I saw this list today, and I mean, just everybody that's been there, right? From, some of the bands, the Monkees, from, back in the day, to Clint Black, to Bone Thugs and Harmony, to all the different comedy shows. Jeff Dunham, I'm sure, does really, really well there. Is Ron White on that list somewhere?
Ron White is on that list. Fortunately, he was not able to play the theater the day he was supposed to when I was there. He had a medical emergency when he got off the plane and had to go straight to the hospital, but he did play a few years prior.
Yeah, Jeff Dunham, Bill Engvall.
You're leaving off my favorite, Neil Young and Crazy Horse. That was two crazy shows.
Right. And Brian Reagan, I'm sure he probably does decent in Bakersfield. Yeah, this list was interesting to me because Kid Rock, I didn't realize that Kid Rock had performed there at the Fox Theater. Cyndi Lauper, right, back in the day. Ray Charles, right, yeah. Tom Jones. Yeah, some big names that have
Merle Haggard.
Yeah, it's Leanne Rimes, Dwight Yoakam. There's some huge names. Some of these names, I didn't realize that as many of these had been through there as there have been. Rodney Carrington, of course, back on the comedy side. So white-collar comedy, what else works there?
Country. Dwight Yoakam, anytime he announces, that show is basically sold out. Bakersfield loves them some Dwight Yoakam. Any of the KUZZ country type stuff that we have out there does well. Classic rock tends to do well as long as we get it on a good night, not an off night. We're on a Monday through Wednesday, which is a disaster. Yeah. And there's still a few genres that I don't have much experience in that I'm trying to find promoters to work with just to get a feel. Some of the newer rock stuff or even like 90s rock that should be stopping there that isn't.
Yeah, Air Supply's coming up, right?
Yeah, Air Supply's coming up.
Yeah, in the middle of August 17th. So tell us about, so you can give that shameless plug, what are some of those things that are coming up so that would give you an opportunity to kind of sell tickets to our listeners that you think that Bakersfield would find interesting?
If there's anything that I would like Bakersfield to pay attention to the most, it's our Colton Classics movies. Okay. I think we're doing something kind of fun with that. Every year is put together a series of movies, usually 2 a month, charge only $5, try to make it as affordable as possible. We do it on a Monday night so that we know nothing else is going on typically, and it's a reason to come down to downtown Bakersfield, hopefully have dinner, enjoy a movie in our theater, and a movie in our theater is just as quality as any other movie theater. We have a state-of-the-art movie system with a 7.1 surround, probably the biggest screen in Bakersfield, so you're having a great experience. And we hope that is something that we help drive people to downtown and spend more money down there.
Sure. When did you start that approach to Colton Classic?
We did that was one of the first things we did when I started there. So that had been back in 2018, and it's always been successful is that it pays for itself. It doesn't make us money, but it does what we want it to. It turns the lights on. We get people coming in. It's crazy how many times people come in that have lived in Bakersfield for a long time and never been into that building. But it's a simple movie like that they come in to watch, and then you start watch them take pictures of everything because they're just in awe of the looks of it. That's been a fun series for us.
Well, yeah, I think if you can start that relationship where somebody goes into the venue for the first time and they go, "Wow, this was a lot of fun," because you guys have put on some fantastic shows in there, and so they go, "Hey, that was a great experience," and we got to keep our eyes and ears open for something else that's coming up next, right?
Yeah, and hopefully, it adds the comedy to their interest, or maybe a rock show. Yeah,
it was a lot of fun. What struggles has Bakersfield had kind of different than what Visalia would have had, if anything, or has it all been very similar?
Bakersfield is a harder market to sell a ticket. I think just the opportunities to go to LA, go to the coast. It has a bad reputation of being a last-minute city, which agents and artists know about, and that can present struggles for us in getting people to land here oftentimes.
Yeah, explain that to me. So
the worst thing is being a promoter with a $100,000 show on the board and a week out, and you've only got $60,000 worth of ticket sales. And then the last week, everybody all of a sudden starts buying. I mean, it'll turn your hair gray. And
is that pretty typical in Bakersfield?
Certain shows, yes.
Yeah, and you're saying that because Bakersfield, we like to keep our options open. And
I mean, I'm only guessing, and that's what every conversation I have with a promoter is. Like, we're trying to figure out what's happening here that's different than other markets, and that's what seems to make most sense. You've got Pismo, you've got Vegas, you've got LA, you've got so many other options that it isn't until you start thinking about it a few days before, it's like, oh, yeah, let's see what the Fox is doing.
Yeah, sure. Is that different from Visalia, or is it the same?
Visalia is a hard ticket, but it's not as hard ticket as Bakersfield. Huh. It was, whatever it is about Visalia, we got a little bit more support from
the community from that perspective.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting, when you're talking about business psychology and what people are doing and how people buy and kind of that whole process, and then to sit and listen to you and talk about in the movie business or the theater side to be experiencing that. What do you think the future looks like, and what do you guys go do to continue to help this thing be successful the way that it needs to?
I am excited about where we're at in the theater going into the next couple of years. When I started, there was just myself and my office manager, Jackie, basically running the place. And now I have assistant theater manager, I have a stage manager, we have a couple more employees underneath us. So the way we handle shows, we're doing very good. We get a lot of compliments from the tours when they come in, just talking about how easy everything has been, which is one of those things you definitely want, because you want to be known as easy to work with and
sure.
easy to come in. The other thing is we've made a couple investments to make the stage more affordable. We bought a state-of-the-art PA system that not only brings your labor costs down because of how you load shows in, but also brings our costs down because we don't have to rent as an expensive system. So there's things like that I'm hoping are the carrots out there for these promoters, that when these shows come in front of them, they think of us first to try to make a stop.
Mm-hmm. How often do you guys have to reach out yourself to go chase those promoters or chase bands, or are you relying that to be inbound traffic?
We do get a lot of inquiries. I'm willing to work with anyone and everyone that seems to be like a real promoter. Some of it's me going to some of the different conventions, and some of it's been promoters that have a history in the building as well, that just, I feel like there's one here in particular that's been working in the building for 20 years.
A local promoter you're talking about?
His name's Doug, and he's actually the reason why most of that comedy's happened there, big part. And now he started his own promotion company called Color of Nine, and he's trying to do it again on his own. He's a big part of our history in that theater and why we've had what we've had.
Yeah, does he specialize in comedy? That would be what he focuses on?
Pretty much, but he gets into other stuff as well. I mean, once you prove yourself successful in the promotions business, you'll see agents reaching out to you on other events, and he'll dabble with the music now and then.
Yeah, I have a kind of a longtime friend, business associate that was involved in one that they tried to promote to get one of the copycat bands to come through to Bakersfield.
I think tribute shows.
Yeah, it was a tribute show, and kind of worked on that, and he worked really, really hard and spent a lot of money, and I think kind of broke even or lost a couple bucks. And so
tribute shows, those are some of the ones that we will promote on our own. They're more affordable, but they are tricky, and you need to find a good tribute show, which I think we've been lucky to have several. Because when you see them come in trying to pretend they're Queen, you're like, oh, you're a little skeptical. But then they come in and they pull it off. You're like, wow, okay, I understand why I just spent $50 to see that tribute show, because they can make it happen. In fact, one of the ones we have coming up, Black Jacket Symphony, on February 23rd with Rumors. They came to me from one of my promoters. They're an East Coast band that, from my understanding, are now selling out theaters our size, and we've been trying to build them in the market. And their niche, I guess, is that every 6 months to 7 or 8 months, they'll come in and they'll pick a different classic rock album, and they have a very large group of artists that they kind of pull from depending on what album they're playing, and they play it perfectly. And when you see them on stage, they sound exactly like in this situation, Fleetwood Mac. We've had them do Led Zeppelin before, which they killed, and each time we bring them in, they keep building their audience consistently. So I can imagine them in another couple of years starting to sell our building.
And so they're here February 23rd. Ticket prices start at $25, go to $33. So that'd be a wonderful night to go listen to Rumors doing Fleetwood Mac album.
And then that night they'll announce the date and what the next album will be so that you know when that one is.
And they would do that one here in Bakersfield as well?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so some of the stuff coming up, Colson Classics, of course, you said that's every Monday night. And then Felipe Esparza, the big food tour. That one you said is sold out?
Basically. We might have some artist holds that are released a few days before, but I never get word on that until, usually a couple days before the show.
Yeah, last minute. That's February 18th. Then that Fleetwood Mac Rumors album, February 23rd, coming up. Flicks, tell me about the Flicks evening.
Flicks is about to be 40-year-old organization that started just wanting to show the movies that Bakersfield would never get their hands on. They'd always be shown in LA, a lot of the independent type stuff.
Okay.
And over the years, they built up this very loyal following. In fact, I think they started showing their movies in the library, and they just kind of kept growing until, I guess about 10 years ago was when they came into the Fox Theater. And we've been partnering with them to show those independent films. It's all stuff that, like I said, you're not going to see it at the major movie theaters. It's the unique artsy type things.
Sure.
And we Friday night where they get to come in, if you want to bring a bottle of wine, you can bring a bottle of wine and enjoy a movie that is not very common, but always very good.
And then Elite's Comedy Fest coming March 11th. And then Colson Classic, Pam Tillis and Lori Morgan.
Yep, another great country show. That one actually should be sold out by the time it gets here.
Yeah, that's March 18th. And then the U.S. Navy Band in concert. So somebody like the U.S. Navy Band, who's promoting that?
So we are. That's U.S. Navy Band actually reaches out to you. They try to form a tour, and it's completely free.
Okay.
We're basically donating the building. If we break even, it'll be on concession sales, but it's just something that we know is good for the community. We've got a great stage and way to get to community, let them know we're doing this, and it's just something fun for us.
Yep, another one, then Colson Classics, then Joanne Shaw Taylor, April 4th.
She's a rock extraordinaire. In fact, she's got a special going on PBS right now that's kind of highlighting just how good she is.
Colson Classics looks like. And then Board Teachers Comedy Tour, that's out in July, and then Air Supply in August. So what, in a perfect world, how full would you keep your venue?
If I could do a show every night, I would. I mean, in reality, if we could start getting to one decent show a week, I would be very happy with that. Right now, we're probably averaging 2 a month, and then with our small stuff.
So when you say decent show, you're talking about that Fleetwood Mac album?
No,
or?
I'm talking about ticket sales. So like a Felipe Esparza, we're sold out, or at least close to.
I see. Okay.
Because we need those numbers. One of the misconceptions with the theater, when you see a ticket price, everybody thinks the Fox Theater is just raking it in, but the reality of that ticket price is we get about $1,500 from that. Everything else comes from concessions, and that's where our bread and butter is. So we have to have these shows.
So ticket sales are going to the promoter substantially, and then you guys are getting $1,500 or something to that kind of cover venue costs, and then concessions is the rest of it.
The rest of it's concessions, yeah.
Yeah, so you got to have bodies in there to sell.
And our facility fee. Everybody asks about our facility fee, but that goes towards the theater itself, and the theater itself is a very expensive theater to maintain and keep going. Basically what we do as far as these shows, that pays for our business. We're not bringing in the type of money that we're able to invest in some of the things like painting the building or our fly system that is 90 years old and needs $1 million of repairs, which is why we're a nonprofit too. So we've got this opportunity to donate, and then the business side of it kind of.
Yeah, we were talking about that before you started the show. Let's talk about that nonprofit kind of portion. So you had made the comment that it looks like a business, and so people don't think of it as a nonprofit organization. So sometimes that that donation is difficult. Talk about that.
Yeah, and I understand it too, because when you talk donations with people, the first thing they always want to give to is kids or illnesses or any of those type of things, which is great. But for our position with the theater, when they see us doing so many shows, I think the first thought is, oh, they're super successful. Why do we need to donate to them?
Sure.
And that is where our reality kicks in, is trying to educate the community that, well, yes, we're paying our bills and we're running this business, but I wouldn't be able to charge enough on rent to bring in the type of money we need to invest in our building the way it needs to be invested in. There's probably $6 million worth of things that I could think of that needs to happen in that place. It's not immediate, but it's the type of things that if we look at the next 100 years, we're going to have to start figuring out how we tackle here soon. So
sure.
yeah, that's the challenge with the donation side.
Yeah, that building was built in 1930s, just in
Christmas
30s?
Day, 1930 is our first day.
Yeah, so it's not a teenager anymore, right? And it's time for a facelift and plastic surgery and all those different things that we all need when we're 90, 80 years old or 90 years old, whatever it happens to be, right? And so that makes sense. It seems. Listen, Bakersfield is fantastic when it comes to its supporting its nonprofit organizations. Sometimes I hear people complain that we don't have the cultural things that we might have out of a Los Angeles or a San Francisco, but certainly the Fox is one of those things that provides decent part of our culture. And so
entertainment and the commerce too, like what we do for downtown on a commerce level is huge.
Sure.
We have a little calculator that we use that was provided by Neva, and on a yearly basis we're driving about $6 to $7 million towards our community with just the shows we do. So there's a lot of things that building provides beyond just being a beautiful building. Entertainment is special and needs to be invested in.
Well, listen, I think every community needs something like that. We can't go do everything out of Rabobank Arena, right? And, way too big and can't do that. So that nice little intimate venue that the Fox has and a beautiful facility for things like these concerts or comedy shows, I think that's fantastic, right? So it's easy to understand why a community like Visalia would get behind that for their community and Bakersfield as well. Ultimately, do you feel like Bakersfield embraces the Fox the way that it should?
Oh, absolutely. If anything, what I said prior was taken wrong, don't get me wrong. Bakersfield loves that building. When we went through COVID and did that Marquee Inspired program, we had a line of people wanting to put messages up to help us get through that, and it helped us get through in a big way. So,
sure.
Yeah, Bakersfield definitely loves that building.
Yeah, no, I think they do. I think, and I'm going to be guilty of this. We take it for granted, right? We always think that it's just going to be there, and we think that it kind of takes care of itself. And so, we don't realize that, that it is a nonprofit organization and that it's tough to make ends meet at times. We just don't get that part.
With the volunteering too, and I may be jumping ahead, but the Memories on H stuff, we've been educating primarily on the old stuff, but most recently jumped into just how the building itself was saved in the 90s. And there were a lot of people that put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into fixing that theater in the most affordable way to get it done. And the theater itself, we have a huge debt of gratitude to. And there's probably tons of people that I don't even know who they are because they kind of keep popping up. And oh, yeah, I volunteered here. I did that. I'm like, really? Like, I had no idea. Like, thank you. Like, how?
Sure. So tell us more about Memories on Age project that's coming up. So tell us about that project.
So Memories on Age. Ultimately, we want to write a book. I was back at a conference for LHAT, which is the League of Historic Theaters, and the Tennessee Theater had this beautiful coffee table book. And I was like, Bakersfield deserves this for the Fox Theater. Came back, proposed the idea, the board loved it, and the first step we felt to be successful this was to reach out to the community. It's a community theater. There's tons of stories about it, pictures, people that have worked there, whatever the experiences are, and we just kind of went out with some emails, some social media, and we started getting a lot of people coming in, telling us their stories, and we try to do a post every week or a couple of weeks with somebody that's coming in with something unique in our history, and in hopes that we really build up all the information we can and write a book, not just about the Fox, but even kind of the corporation itself and how it started in the 30s and essentially how we've gotten to this point.
So if we could tell our listeners how they might participate in that or what you're looking for, what are you looking for from people specifically?
It's honestly been anything or everything. We just had somebody come in the other day with 200 tickets from the theater, and kind of like that list of names there. I was seeing tickets like, I didn't know this person played here, and tell us about the show. We had another gentleman come in with posters and all these cool art from the Fox in the 90s that we didn't know was a thing. We've had past employees. We had one woman here that her father ran the Fox in the 50s, and she happened to come across a box in her garage, and the memorabilia as far as our concerns in there was incredible. He had books of how all the different accounting, the Fox Theater Corporation type stuff. Like, it was a huge educational find for us. So it's kind of a little bit of everything. Like, if you feel there's a story, we would like to hear it.
Sure. Who's going to write that book?
That's the next problem.
Right. Yeah. That sounds like a wonderful project,
yes.
Right? But somebody's got to curate all of that and put it all together. So
we're trying to pull at people's heartstrings. So if you're a book writer out there and the Fox Theater's any interest, talk to me. We do have a person in LA that we're hoping to bend an arm as well. There's still a lot of the research I think that we need to get done, but that absolutely is a big question that we need to answer soon.
So what do you do with that book ultimately? Do you sell that as to the community as a kind of a piece of memorabilia? Or is there one that goes on the coffee table?
No, I would like this to be something that we get a ton of. One of the ideas that Tennessee gave me is that they give each artist that book so that when they leave, they remember that venue and hopefully have that warm spot in the heart that they want to come back.
Sure. Marketing piece in some way.
And every person in Bakersfield should have it on their coffee table.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, you go look at the people that these quote notable past events and performers. When I saw this list, I was like, holy goodness, wow. I mean, you've got just some amazing talent that have been through that facility, and I think most of us wouldn't think in those terms. We just wouldn't. And so, that piece alone, to somebody that goes through there today, would look at that and go, oh my goodness, right? Yeah. And so I could see how it would kind of drive it from that perspective. So at this point, what have we not asked you and you have not told us, about that theater, and you'd like to communicate before we let you go today?
If there's anything, sign up for our email list. I know of a few things that we'll be announcing soon that are pretty exciting, not just in shows, but on our VIP / small little venue on H Street. We're getting close to finishing that, and another side project that I'm keeping my fingers crossed as well. Our email list is where we tell everybody first. So it's just, you go to BakersfieldFox.com, there's a little box on the bottom that says click here, you add your email to it, and just don't delete us off of it.
Sure. BakersfieldFox.com.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. I will do that myself when I get home tonight. Is I'll put that on my email list, and I'd love that because, shame on me, but forgive me for this. But like, I'm looking at some of the things that are coming up on this list, and I can see myself going, yeah, I want to go with that. Grab some friends, and we're going to go see Air Supply, for example. But if I normally live my life the way that I do, this would go right past me, and I would be unaware that it's happening.
Well, and the other thing about it too is you're actually helping to bring shows in. Marketing is an expensive part of doing a show.
Sure.
And something as simple as us being able to email you, even if you delete it, but maybe you get that one, you're like, oh yeah, I want to go to that, to where our promoters don't have to spend $10,000 a show to market, that would be a big deal to us.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a good thing. And I think if you like the Fox Theater, I think you should be on that email list. So BakersfieldFox.com, and then subscribe to that email list. I think that's a fantastic thing. What else?
Buy some merch. We got a really creative artist that designed some one-of-a-kind merch for us. Things that kind of take from the different architecture with the building. Kind of fun, creative way to support us and look good walking through the streets of Bakersfield.
Yeah, it's available, I'm assuming, kind of at the venue itself, and
or at fox.com.
Or on the website.
Yep.
A couple of different things we do. We kind of always wrap with some different questions, and I want to catch you for some of this. So you've kind of had an interesting career. We were talking about it kind of before we got it started. Who, if you had to go back and look at a mentor, though, for you personally, your kind of personal success and business success, tell us about that mentor.
His name's Danny Humson. He's the gentleman that owns the Hanford Fox Theater. And when I first started in Visalia, he reached out to me and really educated me on the show side of things. And as I got to learn more about him, he is one of the most educated people I've ever met as far as the history of these buildings, the who, what, why, wheres, and all that type of stuff. He still reaches out, and we try to have a beer at least once every couple months to kind of catch up and talk. And it would definitely be him. And if you ever had a chance to go to Hanford Fox Theater, that's a great theater as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And he reached out to you originally when you were working at Visalia. Oh, good for him. That is awesome. So number 2, if you could turn back the time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell him or her? So I have to tell our listeners, when we started this conversation, before we started the podcast, that I told Matthew that I'm an accountant, and he said, yeah, I studied accounting in college. And so then we started laughing about, why he didn't pursue an accounting degree and all of that. And so then now looking back and kind of reflecting on, everything you've done since 18. So what would you change, or what would you tell yourself now?
I took this question as more of what I'd tell my kid, who coincidentally just turned 18. Growing up in the small town, Porterville, Terabella area, thinking that is basically the world that is surrounding us is so wrong. And to go out there and experience a lot of these other cities as well. Because you get a lot of great ideas when you travel around and see what other people are doing and how different cities are being ran. And
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a big world out there. I grew up in Arvin, for the record, and so I knew I didn't want to stay in Arvin, and I love Arvin, by the way. My parents still live there, and I love the community, but I just didn't see myself staying there. And so my dad worked in farming, and I love farming, but I didn't see myself, wanting to work in farming. And so, I wanted to get out of there, but my venue was Bakersfield, right? So I was going from Arvin to Bakersfield, which was a very large step, but very insignificant in the scheme of the place, right?
You go to these places and you bring something back and you make your community even better.
No, yeah, you really do. We all need to explore. I mean, it's. I don't know if we put all of our kids in the military so that they have to travel the world or whatever they do, but like you said to your 18-year-old child, that they really need to get out there and explore. To then, if you come back to your community, then fantastic. But but maybe you keep going because it's a big world out there. If you could be remembered for one thing at the end of your life, so you're an old guy and you're looking back and you're being remembered for one thing, what would that be?
If there's somebody that writes a book about music and bringing back kind of, I feel like, the culture that we've lost with the Bakersfield sound and that type of stuff, I hope I'm a part of that history, because I really want us to get back to being a rockin' town again and having the type of reputation that the city had back the 60s and I guess in the 40s to 60s with the Bakersfield sound and what was going on with all the honky tonks and that type of stuff. It's a very cool thing that we had and something special, and I hope we get back there.
Yeah. Well, listen, you have a big part of the talent that's necessary to do that. So you've got to, I know you've got your plate full. There's no doubt about it, doing all the things that you do, but you could have a big part of that. Tell us about getting in contact with you and the Fox. Give us all of that. It's obviously the website you gave us. That's bakersfieldfox.com. What about all the other social medias and phone numbers and things like that?
We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Those are our two big social media platforms, and I have no problems with answering emails. So if you just sent me an email, matt@thebakersfieldfox.com, I'll respond.
Okay, matt@thebakersfieldfox.com.
Yep.
Yeah, I got to tell our listeners again, I think number one would be get on the email list, just so we're just aware of kind of what's coming through Bakersfield. I think that's easy. I get, like everybody else, we all get a ton of junk emails, and that's one that's not junk. I mean, I think most of us in the community, we would actually be interested to see what's coming through Bakersfield, and whether we're interested in it particularly or not. So
and when we do it, we try to have it in the title so that you can see very quickly if it catches you or not.
Sure.
If it's worth opening or just waiting for the next one to come from us.
Sure. Yeah. Matthew, thank you very much for coming in today. I appreciate that, and look forward to seeing you over there at the venue sometime soon.
Thank you, John. This is fun.
This show has been brought to you by the Law Office of Kyle Jones, Troy Burton with the Lynn Company, CPA John Duffield, Scott Hansen Real Estate Lender, broker and investor, Dave Plivlich, President and CEO of the Marcom Group and MarcomBranding.com, and Amanda DiGiacomo, President of Atlas Financial Solutions. You've been listening to the Our 2 Cents podcast. Check out the show notes for links and more information about the show. Also visit our website at our2centspodcast.com or catch us on Instagram at Our 2 Cents Podcasts. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share with others.